Okay, praise be Jesus Christ, Ave Maria, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So today we're going to have a discussion about artificial intelligence. This should be something along the lines of an introductory discussion. I'm not sure how deep we'll go about this. We're going to talk about our feelings, sentiments as it relates to artificial intelligence, probably come at this from different perspectives. So I'm joined by my friend Nate Delp, who is a coworker of mine at a high school. We are teachers. I'm also joined by Peter Fricke. So, Peter, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Hi, I'm Peter Fricke. I live in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I'm a public relations professional. So I've had some hands-on experience with some of the new generative AI tools that they are coming out with seemingly every day. I work with a lot of different programs that are very eager to incorporate these tools into their offerings.
Okay, thank you very much. Um, Good. So we didn't really have much of a preliminary talk about this. I'd introduced this topic to Nate a little bit. So I'm going to just dive in with what I'm coming at it with my thoughts about it. So I have something I'm going to read just a brief passage here. I'll explain this. And then also Nate and I being teachers, we have been encouraged to use AI more and more as we prepare lessons or for, create it can generate a quiz or test for you. So, Peter, you're probably more experienced using AI than we are, definitely than I am. But I'll start out by saying I have I right from the beginning, I have reservations about this. And as you said before I began recording, you don't want to necessarily come at this from a Luddite perspective, but it's something that maybe promises more than it can bring forth, more than it can fulfill. And I think there are some latent dangers. What I want to talk about, though, from my perspective, so most of these videos I do and what I do when I teach has to do with theology. Um, and so I'm going to read just a brief passage from The Science of the Cross by Edith Stein. And I'll tell you why this made me think of artificial intelligence. So, Science of the Cross, she's talking about St. John of the Cross, and she's talking about St. John of the Cross as an artist and about the power of the image, structure, and symbol. So without going too in depth, maybe this is something I can talk about later, or maybe we can go a little more into this. When she's talking about images, she's talking about images in visual arts, in poetry, in music, in human creation, in structures, and in the power of symbol. And she says, every genuine work of art is, in addition, a symbol. So anything that's a genuine work of art is, in addition, a symbol, whether or not this is its creator's intention, be he a naturalist or symbolist. It is a symbol, that is, it comes from that infinite fullness of meaning into which every bit of human knowledge is projected to grasp something positive and speak of it. And so when I thought about this, and then I can turn it over however you guys, this is just where I'm coming from. Artificial intelligence is being used more and more to create, not just, I mean, people create AI art, to create images, but to do human work. And so what I was thinking about is the dangers of what this kind of pseudo intelligence uh, the dangers of having this kind of pseudo intelligence doing something that God has intended for humanity. And work is good, and it's good for men, for women, for humans to work. And so I even think of things like I mean, philosophically speaking or morally speaking, what are the dangers of even having artificial intelligence create art for me? I know AI can be used to create, I could type in, if I have the right program, I could type into like, write me a short story in the mode of like Leo Tolstoy, and it will do that, and it can fool a lot of people. It can write a movie script. And so it can create art. So there's a couple questions there like, is that even art? If it's created by AI, is it art? And is there such thing as art detached from humans? And then what about this process of having something that is using our knowledge in a way that is beyond our capacity to use our knowledge to do our work? That's what I was thinking of. And so I already come at things anyway. I am probably a little bit of a Luddite anyway. I'm always skeptical of things. Um,
A little
but
skepticism is good.
yeah, and so I don't want to keep rambling on, but that's what made me think about it. Like what are the implications as far as humanity goes? Like as far as humans created in the image and likeness of God, made to work and to do God's work in creation, like what are the dangers? Because also AI, it can do things, it uses our knowledge to do things in exponentially faster ways, but um it can also lie. It lies. I mean, it prevaricates. It creates new things. So that's what I was coming at it with. So I had spoken to Nate, and then Nate had brought you up, and so I was hoping you guys could add your own perspectives. Maybe not exactly with what I'm talking about, but your own experiences with artificial intelligence, and
I,
maybe
I
yeah.
think that might be a good idea because you put a few thoughts out here and I jotted some bullet points down. And I'll just tell you kind of my hot take because Brad texted me about this a few weeks ago saying, hey, do you use AI in your teaching at all? And where Brad teaches theology, I teach mostly literature. And the way we've been encouraged to use that in school is like helping you generate new ideas for lesson plans, helping you provide feedback to people. Like you can put in an ideal answer and then it'll like scan the answers the kids get and say it's about this close to it, or little things like that that are designed to be efficient. But my hot take on it in general was basically that I don't think that human beings, like each individual human being, doesn't need to be completely original in everything that they do. There have been so many generations before us that have discovered so many things. It's the old adage, there's nothing new under the sun. Well, it's new to me, right? And it's new to my kids and it's new to my neighbors. So as we pursue knowledge, it's not necessarily our imperative to discover something brand new each time we do it. And I think we kind of fall into that trap sometimes. Um, so there is a value and a nobility in pursuing your comprehension of whatever it is you're studying. In my case, it's usually classic texts, right? So like my pursuit of Oedipus Rex is mine, but I can look at what else other people have said. But ultimately, that text becomes the teacher. It becomes the mentor to me. It's not something I'm seeking to master. It's something that I'm constantly engaging with. Whereas if I'm using a tool like AI, it's going out there and it's going to scrape what everybody else has said about it and feed me back their understanding of it, where I haven't actually done any of that work to reach those understandings. Now, maybe it's a good idea to get those ideas into your mind, but I think that there's something arrogant about using that AI, and there's something humble about pursuing that knowledge on your own. That's kind of where my guts went. Um, the further you pursue something, like the more humbling it becomes because the more you realize there is to find. It's just like knowing another person, right? Like the more I get to know my wife, the more there is to know about my wife. But I could write into an AI program, hey, how do I be a good husband? And it would give me all sorts of stuff. Well, it doesn't tell me anything about that other person. So I think that that pursuit of knowledge and that like humility in that pursuit of knowledge is akin to discovering God and coming to know God. And that's a lifelong pursuit. That's something we'll never accomplish until we're dead. So that's like an ongoing thing. So conceptually, AI kind of presumes that you somehow deserve the understanding and the bounty that everybody else has created and produced throughout all of history. Like you're somehow entitled to that without having to put the effort into reach depths of understanding on your own. So, you know, I don't know that I agree that efficiency or speed is always a net good. I think that we are best at the pace where we have existed. Reading, writing by hand, that's what we are best designed to do. And even like typing, like I find myself, my mind races and my thoughts get jumbled because I can type too fast. But if I have to write by hand, it forces me to be a little more attentive and in the moment. So those were my hot takes on it in general. The idea of like reaping where you didn't sow. And I know I threw out a couple ideas there as well, but I just kind of wanted to see. I think that's a good idea. I heard what Brad said. I would like to hear what's your hot take on it, Peter?
Well, I want to kind of go back. So first of all, this is fun because I like never disagree with you, Nate. I think I'm going to disagree with you a little bit here.
Excellent.
But I liked where Brad started off because what I was hearing you say, Brad, is basically AI is soulless, and I totally agree with that. What Nate was talking about with the allowing you to get tasks done more quickly and so forth, that's like one of the few areas where I've really seen some actual utility to these programs. So, for instance, I send out press releases almost every day for my job. And part of the whole process is I put the press release into a program and it'll take it off of a Word document and it uses AI and it puts things together. And it's pretty good. It gets most of it right. I have to go back in and change things around. But all in all, I spend less time using this tool than I would if I had to start it from scratch. And then it'll help me with drafting an email to send to reporters. And I can get, again, in a couple of seconds, it'll do 5-10 minutes worth of work for me. But it's not perfect. And I've got to make sure that it's not sending something out that sounds silly or irrelevant. But it's not revolutionary. I mean, it's nothing I couldn't do myself. And I think that's where, people kind of come to this skepticism is that this is being sold as a completely world-changing technology, something to be awed and feared simultaneously. And I think when you really get into the nitty-gritty of it, that just is a lot of hyperbole. And actually, I just came across, interestingly, as I just came across my Axios alerts. They did a survey of Gen Z users. Only 4% of them are using AI on a daily basis. And these are the young people. 14 to 22 is the demographic.
Well, that's
so these are
these
are the early adopters of technology.
Is that knowingly using it, like willingly using it outside of like the behind the scenes stuff?
I would imagine so because they have to
Right.
answer the survey question to say that they're doing it.
I do think that's the distinction because it is built in and it's integrated in so many things.
Yeah, so it says here that 41% have never used those programs. That means that 59% have been exposed to them, and of that, only a tiny sliver see the utility in using it on a daily basis. 11% use them weekly or more, versus 17% used them once or twice and never picked it back up.
Sorry about that. My daughter just came in. She had to tell me something.
Mine's standing here in the doorway waving frantically at me.
Yeah, I put her in bed, but
Mine were carrying chickens into the house too.
So what was that? You said it was 4%? Is this Gen Z?
4% of these people in the survey, I mean, no survey is perfect, but 4% say that they use the AI tools daily. 11% use them weekly, versus 17% used them once or twice and never picked them back up. They just didn't see the value in it. And the biggest reason that they gave for not using AI, they didn't see the value in it. They didn't think it would be helpful.
Yeah.
They're not worried about a Terminator style Armageddon. They don't see how it's going to help them in their lives. And I can totally understand that.
Yeah, I can relate to that. And I think when I talk about it, so I don't have any fear concerning AI. I've used it. Like you said, I have used it a few times. It's done things for me. It sped up a process that I was already going to do. I had to, check the work a little bit. And so yeah, when AI when it first came up and was mentioned, then you had some kind of like this could be what is that, Skynet with Terminator or whatever. Yeah, they could launch the missiles, which I guess I don't know. I mean, I get I guess that could happen. I don't know. I'm not thinking of that. Like when I read the passage, what concerns me is introducing this sharper tool, this tool into a society that is already too reliant on is already unwilling to do its own work or is already experiencing a decline. That's why I mentioned art. Like I think it worries me about artificial intelligence creating art or creating literature or doing that kind of work. Um, and then to play on something Nate said, it's like it's sowing or reaping where you did not sow. And I think sometimes without turning it into a boogeyman, I mean, some of these things could be worrisome because that's, to get biblical on it. I mean, that was kind of what the serpent offered Eve was like, here's this knowledge that either you did not earn or you're not ready for. And so um, that was my question about, we have it at the stage it's at now. I don't even know like what else it could potentially turn into, or maybe this just it doesn't. Maybe it's a bunch of, it's a lot of hype and then there's nothing else there. Um,
I'm seeing two unique discussions, I think, that are worthy of individual address instead of how it's going. So if we can define those things, it's like there is the utilitarian aspect of this, which is what you were describing, Peter. But then there's like the artistic aspect of it, that Brad's talking about, that I was talking about more. So, in one way that I actually have been using this, I've kind of nerded out about this recently, is the latest iPhone update. You can take a picture of a bug or a plant, and it just tells you what it is. And I think that's awesome. Like I like hiking, so like that to me is that's a part of AI that I would totally embrace, and I have. Um, but I think that I had a discussion with a friend of mine recently, and he was talking about it as like he was saying that it was only a tool that would give you time to pursue other things, which seems to fit in that utilitarian aspect that you were describing. Like, but then he also was talking about how you can make art with it, and that art will eventually become indistinguishable from human art. That's where I'm like, no, I don't think that that's true. I don't think that that's possible. So there's like a weird tension, and I think it comes down to the nature of the work of our society. It's very much industrialized and then post-industrial, and it kind of follows that in that model. So the kind of work that it does efficiently fits in that mold, and the kind of things that I don't like it doing are the things that don't fit that mold. Like if I want to write a book or if I want to write a poem, I need to like go and sit alone for a while and let that happen from me, right? And then I need to go back to it. It's not like a once and a done thing to create a piece of art, be it a painting, a poem, a film, script, anything like that. You got to kind of take it out and build it like a craft. I don't see how it's good in helping that, because those people then I would say are just like, they're posers. Like they say they like music, so they write me this song in this kind of a style, and then they tweak it or something. But I don't know, there's something inauthentic about that, and I think kind of anti-human about it, because creativity does well up from within someone. So there's those two different sides that I'm seeing here. There is such a thing as like this industrial helpfulness of it. To my question then becomes, is that work the kind of work we ought to be doing? Maybe that's too broad of a question, because it is what we have in our society. But I think that there's some inherent problems to that. Like if we're so busy that we need to streamline that to free up some time, maybe we just shouldn't be that busy in the first place. Like let go of some of that. Maybe we don't have to have, I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think if you could solve that problem, you'd have something more valuable than AI.
Yeah.
Um, but to what you're saying, I mean, Yeah, I think I mean, going back to the utilitarian side of things, I mean, if I can spend less time on the nuts and bolts and have more time left over to think creatively and strategically, then I feel like I've gained from it. But if I try to ask AI to do something creative for me, it always ends up very hollow. I mean, transparently so.
Right. So I would
I could
compare
ask
this.
AI to write an op-ed for me. It's another thing that I sometimes do is, and I've done it just to see how it will work, and it gives me something that's technically proficient, but I could never submit it anywhere. It doesn't have any character. It
Mhm.
doesn't have any passion. It doesn't bring anything experiential to the table. It just regurgitates things that it's read elsewhere.
So I would make a comparison here, like analogy to like being like a woodcutter, right? If you could swing an axe all day, you're going to be an efficient woodcutter. You're going to be strong. You're going to be contemplative in that. Or you can have a chainsaw and you can still get it done without really compromising the quality of that or the nobility of the work, right? But then, like you're saying, like if I'm trying to write a something human, right? Like something, an opinion, it doesn't seem to fit.
That's interesting. So, yeah, I mean, you were talking about Peter, you write op-eds sometimes. I mean, I think that's an example of something that worries me. If you because right now you could ask AI to generate, you could give it the topics, it could write an op-ed, but it's not probably not going to get punched because published because like you said, it has no passion to it. There's no depth to it. There's not that human quality there that people want to read in the editorial. But I think this is something, and it's not just solely the problem with AI, is what happens when our culture, when our, when we're so inundated uh, with this kind of bland inform way of receiving information or bland way of receiving entertainment that over time it wears down it just wears down everything like until you get to the point where you could submit something like that. I mean, is that is this something that could add to that? One example I'll give quickly, and then see if that makes any sense. If you know what I'm saying, is if you were to look, and I just blanked on the name, but if you were to look at like you go back to the 60s or 70s and look at the kind of uh talk shows, the kind of talk shows that were on TV. You know, you had Buckley, you had Habit. I forget, you had different ones. You had Fulton Sheen on TV. You got stuff. It was entertaining. You could have somebody on there. You could have a musician on there. You could have John Lennon. You could have Muhammad Ali. You could have a politician on there, and it was entertaining. And there would be music, and they would talk. But the level of discussion was so much higher than what. And then you got to like Johnny Carson, and then you went down and it start it we're in the gutter now. Like it's yeah, I feel stupider than them sometimes. And I'm wondering if this is just another, another way to water that down. Um, so not the thing itself, not AI itself, but introducing AI into a system that's already maybe headed the wrong direction with expression or art or writing. Um, does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Um, and I think you kind of see it here and there throughout the culture that there's really a hunger like what you're expressing for something better than what we currently have.
Hmm.
And you know, even in the popular culture, people are reaching back, right? Like, how many genuinely new ideas do you see coming out of Hollywood? It's all remakes. They're
Yeah,
just taking old ideas.
Yeah.
that's a good point here. And I was thinking this when you were talking, Brad. What AI seems to do, and I don't really have a full understanding of how it works, right? But what it seems to be is that it identifies predictable patterns, right? So like that ChatGPT, it looks for the patterns of the words in association with other words, right? So it's like a predictable pattern. Well, what you just said about Hollywood has been going on for a very long time here. And I noticed this. I'm not a big fan of like the Marvel movies or even like the new Star Wars movies. I just never kept up with them. But I do remember being in high school and watching Pirates of the Caribbean. And the first Pirates of the Caribbean was a great film. I have such fond memories of watching that. But then when I go back and I watch it, it's almost like minute to minute kind of like formula of like, here's the opening scene dramatic, but here's a joke to break the tension, and then you launch back into the action. Like there's a very predictable formula they follow, and then they streamline that. And that's kind of what I meant about this like industrialization, right? And Brad, I think, is that kind of what you're saying about the talk shows, right? You had this high quality thing from individuals who were producing content, and then they saw what was working, what was getting people to tune in, and they mimicked the pattern as opposed to doing something equally as valuable, if that makes sense.
I
Right? They
think
found the value in
like
the form instead of in
there's
the.
no and not again, not to be not to get into like nostalgia porn or whatever. Like you can do that too. Like everything was better before or whatever. But it's there's no depth to the content a lot of
Yeah.
times. And since AI is taking what we're giving it, there's different way. I don't know all of it, but from what I understand, there's the way that it receives it, the way that it filters through it. It's actually it's amazing with some of this, the way it does it. But what we're feeding it is maybe not what we want to be feeding it in order to produce what we're asking it to produce. So again, to use I don't know, the talk show, you can use movies to talk show analogy. You could have an entertaining talk show, and it could actually get into deeper content, and you would actually see people show emotions and bring up valid political points and have disagreements that weren't like that weren't very surface. Like you talked about the movie industry. That's one example. Which is it's just recycling things. Or to take another example, like the quality of politician, the quality of the way that politicians speak. Um, I mean, I don't expect anybody to stand up and be like a great orator anymore because they don't like they were in like the 19th century or something, but even like you get a press release from the White House, it's just dumbed down. It's like on a, you know, that's what I'm talking about. And so if I guess I'm kind of glad that maybe I don't know if I'm kind of glad that maybe Gen Z is not using it as much. I wonder if they will. But it, I'm just looking down the road. Um, as these new things are introduced more and more into a culture that's already beginning to degenerate in certain ways. That's what I'm thinking about. And then, you know, and to go back what I brought up at the beginning, like the how every art or anything that a human does, like so we are creatures with body and soul, the hylomorphic nature of body and soul, and we not only make things, we make symbols. And so what happens when we give over the making of symbols to artificial intelligence or something like that? I mean, a perfect example. Well, anyway, I won't bring that up now. Maybe I'll save that. But that's what I meant. I don't want to go off into a very esoteric corner there, but
Well, I definitely see where you're going with that. I guess the kind of counterpoint that comes to my mind would be someone like me. I cannot draw anything more complicated than a stick figure,
Mhm.
but I could conceive of something meaningfully symbolic, hypothetically. Don't ask me to come up with an example. Uh, but you know, there are AI programs out there that would allow me to tell it what I want to, communicate via, let's just say, a painting of some kind, and theoretically come up with something that would both have the meaning that came from my mind, but in a way that's actually aesthetically pleasing, unlike anything that would come out of, putting my hand to paper.
Mhm. Yeah, I
So
know
maybe
what you
there's
mean.
hope.
Yeah, that's exactly part of what I'm talking about. So there's a temp. It's like this. I know exactly what you mean because I can't. I come up with all the time. I'll think about it. I wish I could paint this or do this. I have this thing and I can't. I sit down, it sucks. It looks, I'm not gonna do that. And so I'm like, well, if I could, maybe I'm too lazy now, but if I could feed this information now and it could create something, wouldn't that be great? But then I wonder about, look, should I do that? Ought I to do that? Is
That's
that like
exactly
rubbing the genie's lamp? Am I cheating? I don't know. Does that make sense?
that's exactly what I was going to say. If you can't, then ought you to try? Like in St. Paul says, one body, many parts. Part of that is that rooted in like an envy, or like envy struggling against admiration, where like I would love to go and watch or view those paintings and be able to appreciate them in a purely admiration type of a way, right? As opposed to like, I have something to say too. Well, I might, but it's not going to be in that medium. So ought I to do that? Maybe not. Maybe it's not even in an artistic way. Maybe it's in a being more present in my conversations with other people. Maybe it's like just because you can't create something physical doesn't mean that you can't manifest something creative in your very existence, in the way that you maybe bridge the gap between two people who never met, right? Or something like that is just as valuable. And somebody who goes and sits in their shed for, a month working on a painting isn't going to be able to do that. They're not going to be somebody who brings other people together via their conversation and their personality, but they might through their art, right? So ought you to be doing that? I think it gives people this false sense of purpose, and it distracts them from that humility, like I was saying, of actually trying to discern what that purpose might actually be. Does that make sense?
I mean, to continue the hypothetical, I think that raises an interesting question. If you know, if Brad or I had this, idea, we thought it was a great idea, we felt we had to communicate it through some sort of visual medium, we used AI to get it over the finish line, would we really actually be able to compete with somebody who had that just knack, that natural talent? I mean, I know a guy who can just draw some of the most beautiful pictures you've ever seen on the back of a napkin in 5 minutes because he's bored. If he's got an idea, anywhere on par with mine, he's going to beat my AI drawing every time. So is it cheating? Is it going to work?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. Well, yeah, I think that's a good point. So I don't think it can compete. I don't know. We'll come to see. It can mimic very well, but I don't think it can compete because, like Edith Stein says, like there's there's a spark of the divine or what of human genius that goes into that. It can mimic that, so it could fool you from a distance. So I don't think it can compete ultimately. I would hope not. But I think the fear is that maybe because of, I don't know, maybe because it's more uh, economically beneficial to use this. Like it doesn't matter that it's not as good to push this. So again, I don't want to get into like a fear of it, but I think it's that um, the fact that it can do this and it's doing this often. I mean, and I'll just bring it back to what I do for a living right now. I'm a teacher, and some of the people in that field, some educators, I mean, to them, this is the best thing since a chalkboard or whatever. Like this is something you have to use. This is something you ought to be using all the time. And if if maybe right now younger people aren't interested in it, but if it keeps getting foisted on them, keeps getting pushed on them, maybe they will. And it, I don't know. Are we gonna flood the marketplace, so to speak, with just like AI art or AI stories or AI commercials or AI movies or AI music and different things like that. And um So again, I think I'm just repeating myself there, but that's the fear. And I don't know. That's why I think I wanted to have a discussion to see if does that make any sense, or is that completely unfounded? Um,
I think it does make sense. And going back to the original quote you read, I wrote down one part of it. Um, and it was that I forget how it started. I jotted down, grasp something positive and speak of it. I don't remember exactly how it was said. Right? We seek to grasp something positive and speak of it. Right. So it seems like in that creative world, anyway, you're just trying to grasp something positive. But then that second half, to speak of it, that's not just me telling you about it. I think that that it has something to say that's positive in its creation. Like you said, Peter, it's like there's a hollowness. Um, so I think those two things are worth maybe digging into. What does it mean to grasp something positive, and then what does it mean to speak of it? What does it mean for that art to speak of it? What does it mean for us to speak of it? My other thought then is, if we do end up, and it seems like it's coming, right? People that we work with, Brad, and I don't know if you've run into this, Peter, either, but they said, well, it's not going away, so we may as well learn everything we can about it, so we can, work alongside it as it comes through, and we can teach people to be responsible with it. Well, if it does flood the market, like you said there, or flood the world with this hollowness, does it just create new territory for other stuff then? Right? Is it something that people will get kind of tired about and turn to other things for? Like you said, what did you say was Gen Z who doesn't use it hardly at all?
Yeah.
Like the youngest. Yeah. So maybe it'll be something that Gen X and millennials kind of lean into a lot harder than these kids coming up. And maybe they will find where we see some kind of like rainforest that has everything you could ever possibly imagine in it. They see a desert and they want to go and create whatever that thing is lacking. Is it going to just create new territory for more true, authentic human expression and pacing and interaction?
Well, I have mostly considered this, from a much more like, economic utilitarian point of view. But I do think that there's kind of where are the incentives aligned here? And millennials and Gen X, especially millennials, really seem to have this kind of this competitive desire to feel like and demonstrate that they're with it. You see a lot of stuff on social media and stuff where the millennials are shocked that the Gen Z is changing up the trends. Who could have seen that coming, right? And so I think there's kind of a desire on their part to push AI, the inevitability of AI, whereas Gen Z is looking at it from a much more kind of naive perspective. This is another new tool that's being put in front of me, and do I see a value in it? And evidently not. I'm going to bring in one more study that I found when I was doing some research for this. Did a survey of over 1,500 tech workers, the software engineers, managers, executives, kind of all across the spectrum. More than half of them said they thought that AI is overrated. And these are the people that are, primarily responsible for developing and implementing this technology. So I think that speaks speaks volumes about it as well. I think a lot of what we're told about AI is a glorified sales pitch. So, I definitely, agree with you guys in the sense that there's something lacking, there's something missing from the technology. But I guess this is the optimist in me saying that people will see through it. And I don't think AI is going away, but I don't think it's taking over either.
Well, who do you guys think stands to benefit the most from the proliferation of AI?
Outside of the people that are trying to sell it,
Well, yeah, I mean, there's obviously that, like you can see that there's,
Politicians,
yeah,
they want to sell, they're selling something completely different. They're selling an idea of leadership, right? They want people to say, I need this guy in office, this guy or gal in office, because they're going to lead us to the new frontier. They're going to make sure that we have the national prestige and the economic growth that, and heck, the national security implications, right? That's being hyped especially as well. But politicians are known for speaking voluminously about subjects with which they are very poorly acquainted. I think that's another instance of that here with AI. They want to tell us that they're going to make sure we don't lose the AI race, but they don't even know what that means.
Mhm.
right.
Maybe they are AI. I think Joe Biden might be a bot, but
It started with the birds.
yeah. Well, maybe that's something interesting. Yeah, maybe it is just maybe it is a big puff of smoke. There's not maybe there's not much to it. It is a good tool, and maybe it's being lauded among certain older generations the way it is because like things are winding down a little bit. Like we've been, if you look at human history, like in what's called what we can call the industrialized world or the West or whatever, it's been a pretty fast moving couple of centuries. I mean, you have I don't know where you want to start, but you have like steam engines, you have trains, and you have automobiles, you have airplanes, you have rocket ships. We can go into outer space. You have this production ramping up and ramping up. You have the internet, which is a giant deal. The internet's huge, and that kind of thing. And then yeah, and then maybe like, oh, where are we going from here? Like we're going to outer space, and then we're going deep space, and here's AI. It's the next phase. Maybe it's not. I mean, like you said, maybe it's pushed as maybe it's a big sales pitch. Um, and so maybe the fear there is unfounded, or maybe it's hyped up. I don't know. Um, I'm not over like I haven't used it that much. I'm not overly impressed. I guess I heard so much. I was hearing rumblings of you hear things for a while. I mean, we hear this and that for a long time. And by the time I finally use, I don't know, Chat GPT or something, I'm like, oh, this is neat. But maybe it's not doing too much. Um, so I don't know. I guess that's a good sign, maybe that it's not being wholesale latched onto by the younger generation. Um, and I do certainly concur that you can tell the difference. Again, like I already to echo again, you could tell the difference between human art and human writing, and that which is generated by what we call AI. Um, so maybe it is a giant sales pitch, a lot of it. Or maybe they're just softening us up so the Terminators can come through. I don't know. So,
Well, I was just inspired to go look back a while ago. My boss had us all check out Chat GPT in one of its earlier iterations. For his brother-in-law was being asked to compile a report on it for a major corporation, and so we all spent some time noodling around with it. And I just went and looked back at my notes from that. One that stood out to me, especially in light of this conversation, was I wrote, "It offers little if you want to know the truth." It's great for some things, some minor functions, and it could expedite your googling or save you a few minutes here and there on a task, but it doesn't offer anything deep or meaningful.
hmm yeah,
And if you were to rely on it for that, you would find yourself either misled or disappointed.
yeah. And I guess too, like I'm not even sure. Okay, so maybe just into speaking practically, uh, sometimes I'm not even sure what's the difference. Like if you go to Google now and I put something in, it'll come up and say this is AI generated results. I'm like, well, as opposed to what was it doing before? I mean, is AI just the same things? But I'm not even sure I understand what
Well,
the
they
difference
always did
is.
something similar, right? They had
Yeah,
that feature where they'd show one or two results, and then it would be similar questions, and you could expand the carrot and look and see a different, slightly different answer
yeah.
to a question that was very relevant to your search. I mean, all they did was slap the AI label on it and bring it to the top of the page.
That's what it's. Now I saw that. I'm like, well, what's as opposed to what? Like, what was it? There was a guy. There was a switchboard before. Was there a guy there? Like, hey, buddy, you want to know like what's the score? I mean, like, it's the same thing.
Encyclopedia Britannica now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand that. I can't speak to that. But that is interesting. I had a thought while you were talking, Brad, about like going like deep space and all that stuff. Like imagine sending whatever we have right now out on Voyager 3, like instead of the golden record with whale sounds and jazz and whatever they put on that. So whoever might find that could say, "Where'd you come from?" And it could literally just give you the whole history of the human race. There'd be something kind of neat in that regard. But again, like, why not just send like a archived Wikipedia, on a microchip of some sort either. I guess because you get the interactive capability with it and might be able to adapt to something. That's interesting. I wonder how that would adapt to like communicating with other species. Is there anything about that? Have you ever heard anything like that? I'm out here now. I'm like, whoa, could an AI talk to a dog or something? I don't know. That might be another video.
Oh,
Well, not unless someone out there has written down a translation already, right?
Hmm.
Or at least some kind of Rosetta Stone that would allow it to extrapolate.
yeah. So that's another thing too. So we're not really talking about that, but like, I've seen people have discussions like, could AI gain consciousness or whatever?
All right.
And I'm like, well, it's our consciousness. I don't know what would it be? I don't understand. Like, it's taking everything we give it. Um, so yeah, I don't know how I could. I mean, that's interesting. Like, it could take the work that we've done and use to like better communicate to dogs or things like that. Um, I don't know.
Peter, have you noticed anything in your field of since like have you noticed people putting out press releases where you're like, that's AI?
100%.
Yeah. Have
And
you
I'll tell
noticed
you
any?
what, it's been going on since before the term came into common parlance. I mean,
I do think AI is kind of a misnomer too, but yeah.
yeah, I think it's branding.
Yeah.
The technology is marginally improved from where it was even just a few years ago, um, and yeah, people have been writing press releases, they've been writing news articles with AI for some time, and it's gone from being an incoherent mess to kind of silly sounding to where it is now, where it can be more or less passable, but it's I mean some low level in journalism the biggest threat is it's going to take the jobs of the entry level journalists, the ones who are just writing simple process stories. This happened, three statistics, two quotes, that's the end of it. AI can do that, and then but that's where the experienced journalists cut their teeth. So that's kind of taking out that rung of the ladder for people. So if I have a fear, it's what happens 10, 20 years from now when the people who should be at the top of their field didn't have that experience, and the people who did have that experience are all retired.
Yeah. I think that I know exactly what you're saying in that regard, and I think that kind of goes into what I was saying before is uh, cutting out some of the steps that humans should be taking to get to a place.
Yes.
Who
So
becomes the
in
mentor?
create, yeah. What did you say, Nate?
who becomes the mentor, right?
Yeah.
Like
So
not something you just be.
yeah. Yeah, cutting out the intermediary steps so that you lose that. I mean, again, we've already lost some things over the years for the most part. It's more difficult now to find a master mason or someone who can work with stone in the same way that you used to be able to find. Those people are in high demand. We erroneously sometimes people thought like, well, that's going to go out of style. We don't need that anymore. No, we always need that. We need master carpenters and stonemasons and things like that. We need music that sounds like on vinyl. Like you sometimes want that. We need people that can write well, like do journalism and like you said, but you have to start somewhere and do those things. And some of the process to learning, again, just to go back to the field of teaching, some of the ways you learn and process things is to write your notes down. Like Nate, you said, like if you're typing, it gets a little frantic, but if I'm actually writing things down, I did a lesson on this for my students. The retention is a lot higher when you write down your notes as opposed to just typing your notes or reading, having them, transcribed or whatever. The act of writing the notes aids in your retention because as humans, like we do things with our bodies and then it communicates to our intellect. And so I think that's some of the I don't know if I'm gonna call it fear, but trepidation with that. And also to be frank, like when I go online sometimes I see like horrible AI meme art or whatever, like horrible AI religious art. It's like this has this is this has no soul to it and it's just this weird generated thing. And I guess I was thinking about like, well, God forbid, like what if that becomes like something that's done? So you could do that in the field of art or do that in the field of journalism. And it's just like churning out these pieces of cardboard or whatever. Like this writing that's like you said, it's passable. It's just doing this job, which is that's okay because it saves money, but it takes away that step from humans that is part of the ladder to expertise. Um,
That's one of the things I struggle with as an English teacher too, when you're trying to get kids to write, is they're looking for formulas because you can objectively measure the quality of your writing if it fits this formula. If you've got your topic sentence and your quote and your analysis after that, or whatever that is, like those formulas, like we've been fighting against this predictive text model or whatever AI, whatever we want to call that. We've been fighting that in education for a long time. I think authentic educators, like true educators, have been. But there is a part of our world that needs technical approaches to things, measurable approaches to things. That's what's so frustrating to me is like, I don't exist in a world where I need to send out a press release. I don't exist in a world where I need to quantify um, billing, right? Like, let's say I was a master plumber. AI might be really great for me to just say, write up an invoice for this job, boom, and it would be done, right? Because I don't need to sit down and make that creative. So I think that there's two worlds that are really kind of like, what are we going to do with this? Some people are like, let's shove it away and forget about it because we saw Terminator. And there's other people who are like, no, this can actually make it way more efficient for us. Um, but then like you said, you lose that progression that exists in that world of, leveling up, so to speak, right? Like, let me cut my teeth here and let me get here. Um, do you, Peter, do you think that there's any more views or engagement since you've seen that technology become more refined in the stuff that you guys put out there, or do you think that it's about the same?
Um,
I don't know if you can answer that or not without looking, but
well, I mean, I usually follow the statistics every time, for instance, I send out a press release. I think there's something to be said for it. These systems do, they study the results, and when it comes to, for instance, putting a provocative subject line on your email, I mean, you're not going to get a click on your press release if they don't even open the email. So that's your first step. And I think it's hit and miss, but I'd say it hits more often than it misses. It's generally pretty good at identifying uh, an engaging way of presenting some information. But at the same time, I think that a well-crafted subject line done by a human has greater potential. But people have off days, machines don't. So consistency, I think the machine's got us beat, but potential, we still have the edge.
Mm-hmm. Very good. I think I just looked at it. We're coming up on an hour now, so I think we're gonna wrap this up. So I like this discussion as far as introductory discussions for me to talk about that, and I think I'm coming away with the same kind of thing. The idea is, so maybe it's not what it's cracked up to be, but again, I think one of the things we agreed on here is, one, it can be very useful. It's not the end of the world thing like maybe some people thought it was, but one of the dangers there is that it could take out some of these intermediary steps. Because what it seems to be to me is just, again, a more refining of tools that we were already putting into place. But I think it goes back to, Nate, you brought up, and again, I'll turn it to you guys if you have any closing thoughts, but I was thinking about, you said about the Industrial Revolution. I think you brought up that industrialization. Um, the there was a lot of good that came out of industrialization. There's also a lot of bad things that came out of the industrial, what we call the Industrial Revolution, industrialization and urbanization. And so, how much of it was the technology that was introduced, and how much of it was the culture that it was introduced into, and and how do we use these things? Like, just because you have a machine that can, you know, just because you can have one machine that can do the work of 50 blacksmiths in one day doesn't mean that you're going to automatically, treat people worse or treat people less than human, which is what happens sometimes with industrialization, or treat people like machines. That's the problem. And I think that's the fear, is like treating, if we tend to think of machines in terms of humanity, or in with human adjectives, or tend to think of them as having human faculties, then the danger is to treat people like machines, or to refer to people in mechanized terms, which we already do that. We already do that sometimes. And so that's really what I was thinking of. And go back to my opening thing with Edith Stein, human work, not just with art, the painted art, with poetry, music, human work that we do. Um, there's a certain manner into which that is symbolic. It's representative of us, and it speaks of a truth that goes beyond us. If you do work and you do it well, it's honorable work, whatever you're doing. You do it and you do it well. It it makes you more human, and the people that participate in it, it makes them more human. And so, um, yeah, that's my closing thought. I just am reticent to use it, or to put laurels on it, because I don't want to see any more loss of humanity. And I think we have a culture that is ripe for that, to introduce it into. So I'll turn it over to you guys. You have any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
I would just add one thought to what you just said there too, like a technology that would replace the job of 50 blacksmiths. To go back to my analogy of like the chainsaw, just because you can cut down trees faster doesn't mean you should cut down all the trees, right? Like it would just become too much at some point. So where you kind of looked at it as it's replacing some kind of a human thing, it can also just decimate what humans are meant to tend or interact with as well. I think which ultimately is like other humans. So yeah, that's kind of the final thoughts that I had there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good analogy. It's a tool, and how it ends up will depend on how we make use of it.
Yeah. So
Maybe
maybe
that means we need to know who we are more clearly too, right? Or
Let's
what we
ask
are more
ChatGPT.
clearly.
just says, yeah, who you are. Who am I?
Yeah. What are we? Why am I?
Why am I? What doth life? So, so thank you both very much. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Nate, for having this discussion with me. I thought it was very interesting. As always, if you're watching this, if you have any comments, you could put them in the comments below. If you have any specific comments for Peter or Nate, put it online. I could send it to them. Maybe we can have more discussions like this in the future, or you want to see anything else related to this or anything down this road. I would like to hear about it. So I'm going to close with a prayer and thank you both very much. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Most Sacred Heart of Jesus, have mercy on us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you very much.